So great afternoon, everybody who's on the call, and welcome. I just want to go through a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Currently, your microphones and your cameras are muted. If you do have questions related to the webinar, please raise your hand. You will find that in your Zoom panel. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to get started and be respectful of everyone's time. I do know that some people will be joining us later. But one of the things that I believe in is that you can either let life happen to you, or you can make life happen for you. And for those of you that are on this call, you're taking the steps that need to be taken to make life happen for you. So welcome to Dentists Working Smarter. The intention of Dentists Working Smarter is for us to help our community get to where they need to be. I've had the privilege of serving this industry for the last 20 years, and this industry has taken great care of me and a lot of my coworkers as well. But I also believe a rising tide lifts all boats. So one of our intentions is to help everyone get a little bit better, because the better we do as individuals, the better we will do as an industry. So moving forward, let's talk about the format. From 6 o'clock until 7, you will be drinking from a fire hose. It's a little bit of a paradigm shift on case presentation with the intentional outcome of getting patients to say yes to treatment. From 7 to 7:15, we'll be doing an open Q&A. So if you have any questions, again, raise your hand. We'll take a look at those questions. And you probably have questions that other people would have too, so don't be shy. At 7:15, we're gonna have Shay, who's the president of Digital Resource. He's actually hosting us for the meeting today. He'll be speaking from 7:15 to 7:45 on how do you attract prime cases and increase revenue. He'll be doing his Q&A from 7:45 to 8 o'clock. And then the last part of our format is our sponsors. They have a couple of gifts for all of the attendees, some valuable gifts, and pretty much on the generous side. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to start off with a true story. This happened back in August of last year. And so you're all aware, I live in South Florida. You don't get hotter than South Florida in the month of August. You will have 95-degree weather, 95% humidity, and 30% chance of rain, which means it's going to rain every single day. It was a Saturday morning. My friend George was dropping his car off for service, and he said, "Hey, can you pick me up at the dealership?" So being that it's hot outside, I'm waiting inside where it's nice and cool. And for those of you that I have not yet had the privilege to meet, or those of you that know me, I'm not the type of person that would drive a minivan. I don't think there's anything wrong with them, but a minivan is not my style. I like a small, little, tiny car, two-seater, something that's visceral and something that's old-fashioned. Even if it has a stick shift, I love it. But while I was in there, I was looking at a minivan, and out of pure curiosity, I meet Bob. And I said, "Hey, Bob, not interested in the car, but just out of curiosity, how much is this minivan?" And Bob takes off and disappears. So I don't think much of it, right? Now, keep in mind, Bob is about 6'5", about 300 pounds, in his early 60s, and it's 95 degrees outside, and he's wearing a suit. And it's August. It's 95 degrees at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's humid like you cannot believe. And he disappears. My friend George finally comes out from service. So I said, "Hey, George, let's go." And as we're walking outside, who do you think pulls up? Bob pulls up in the minivan. And my question to Bob was a simple one. I said, "Is that for me?" And my friend George starts laughing because my wife and I do not have children. A minivan is definitely never going to be in my cards. And I asked him out of curiosity, I said, "Why did you bring the van up?" And Bob told me, "But you asked me how much." And he's all hot and he's all sweaty. But it made me think of dentistry. And you think Bob got angry at that point? He was furious. And my question to him is, "Why are you so angry?" And he said, "Well, you asked me how much was it?" And my question to all of you that are on this call is, who should Bob really be angry at? Did he actually create the value? Did he ascertain whether I really was interested in the car? And for those of you that are on the webinar, the real question is, have you done the same thing with your patients? And has this ever happened to you? I'm sure it has, where a patient says, "How much is it? How long does it take to deliver?" Where we take those as buy questions before we've actually built the value. And then we wonder why treatment didn't get accepted. And we'll talk to our front desk staff or our treatment coordinator, and we say, "Hey, how come you didn't close them?" Well, the real question that I have for you is, how come you didn't close them? So the purpose of the seminar today is to help you don't be a Bob, but more importantly than that, what if you could separate the clinical aspect from the financial aspect? What if you could have an informed conversation with your patients whereby not taking money into consideration, you could determine, is this a treatment that the patient truly wants? And once the patient wants that treatment, separate from that, a financial conversation is had at the front desk. But you know for certain that your patient is absolutely committed to doing that treatment. And I hope that makes sense for you guys, but to make sure that they are committed to that treatment. That being said, let's go through a little bit of the nuts and bolts of what today is going to be about. So I apologize. So make a long story short, let's talk about what this is about. So number one, it's a nuts and bolts, getting back to basics about how do we communicate better with our patients? How do we communicate with them in a way that's effective? How do you, instead of working harder, how do you work smarter? And again, this is about you today. It's about working smarter, not working harder. So for everyone on the call, I ask that for today, become curious, or for the next hour, become curious. But are you willing to go the extra mile, not to work harder, but to work smarter? Are you willing to stretch a little bit to get curious and maybe do things in a different way? Because when you stay in your comfort zone, the reality of it is not much is going to change, but it's when you step outside of your comfort zone where the magic really happens. And what's interesting is when you step outside of that comfort zone and you look back, was that comfort zone really so comfortable? So let's get ready to leave the comfort zone. Let's get ready to get curious, and let's talk about creating. Let's talk about making life happen for you, not letting it happen to you. That being said, the big question that all of you have right now is, what is in it for me, right? What's in it for me that I'm on this conference call? So let's talk about what's in it for you. But before I do, I'd like to go through a couple of definitions so all of us are on the same page. Number one of my favorite definitions, and it's at the bottom of every single email I ever send out, is insanity. It's continuing to do the same thing and expecting different results. How often have you found yourself doing the same thing over and over and over again and just wishing you got more results? Or sometimes you'll even work harder and you'll still get just more of the same. I also want to define treatment acceptance. There are a couple of different ways to measure treatment acceptance. One way to measure treatment acceptance is you present a whole bunch of treatment to a patient, and does the patient say yes or no? But you could present a $3,000 treatment plan, but all the patient says yes to is a pro fee. Well, is there a better way to measure treatment acceptance? The way I look at treatment acceptance, and I have to presume with a couple of rare situations, almost everything that you present to your patients is going to be necessary with the exception of certain cosmetics or certain whitenings. But we measure treatment acceptance as percentage of dollars accepted by a patient versus total dollars. And the formula is a very, very simple one. You take the total accepted treatment divided by the total treatment presented, and that's where you'll get your treatment acceptance percentage. One of the things that I find very interesting is if I ask you, or if you ask yourself, what is your treatment acceptance? The typical answers I get are 65%, 75%. But I would challenge everyone on this call, and I don't know what your personal treatment acceptance is, but in our profession, people have a tendency to remember the patients that come back, but not the patients that don't come back. So if I were to ask you, what do you think the average, not necessarily your number, but what do you think the average treatment acceptance is in dentistry? Is it 25%? Is it 50%? Is it 75%? You know what's interesting? This number hasn't changed for almost 20 years since I first got into the business. When you look at the average amount of treatment presented, 24.8% of dollars presented actually get accepted in the average dental office. That's like having a restaurant where 4 people show up, but only 1 person buys a meal. But despite that, we still do well in dentistry. So my focus today is to help you increase the treatment acceptance, but I want to do some basic math. If you look at the average solo practitioner office, they'll typically present about $200,000 per month. That's about $2.4 million per year that they're presenting in treatment. Typically, 25% of that treatment gets accepted, which equals $600,000 in revenue, which interestingly enough is about the average revenue that a single practitioner in this country will make. But what if you could take that 25% treatment acceptance and bring it up to 35%? What would that mean for you? Here's the math. If you do 35% of $2.4 million, That's $840,000. That's an increase of $240,000. And by the way, out of that $240,000, very little of that is going to go to expenses. Yes, you'll have your lab fees. Yes, you'll have your materials and maybe some supplies, but this will be a chance for you to work smarter, not harder. Now, hopefully I have your attention now. That being said, as we go into this, I want to go through this very quickly about one of the secrets of learning. We've all been to school, we've all studied, sometimes smart, sometimes hard, or sometimes just repetitively doing things over and over and over again. And I'm certain that everybody on this call has been to a seminar before or has been to a CE course. You've been to college, you've been to school. And what's interesting is, you ever notice that sometimes you retain a lot and sometimes you retain very little? How many times have you gone to a seminar and say, you know what, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that as soon as I get back. And then when you get back, Monday happens, dentistry happens, and then you forget about it. And then a week goes by, you say to yourself, wait, I had all these great ideas for the seminar, but I didn't even write them down. So how much do you want to retain today? If you want to retain 25%, just sit back, pay attention, and do nothing else. If you'd like to retain 35%, pay attention and take notes. If you want to retain 45%, pay attention, take notes, and apply it within the first 48 hours. But if you really want to retain this, 65% is the ideal goal. Do all of the above and teach. So today, I want to make sure that everyone understands that this is a safe place. This is a place free of judgment. I would strongly suggest that you raise your hand if there's something, a salient point that you'd like to make while we're going through the webinar. We have Shay that's going to be assisting me, and I'll be assisting Shay later on if you have any questions. Again, it will be in your Zoom panel where you can raise your hand for a question. And I want to make this a little bit of fun. But one of the things I want to make sure that we don't do is that we don't do verbal vomit here where we piss and moan or complain about things. Let's look for solutions. So to get us started, I want to start off with, where does excellence begin? Because in order to work smarter, not harder, it starts with excellence. And one of the things that I'm a firm believer in is good is the enemy of great. And that's one of the key reasons why we have so little that becomes great, because people settle for mediocrity. Jim Collins said it best: the vast majority of companies never become great precisely because the vast majority become quite good and they don't go any further than that. So I'm hoping everybody's ready to go to the next level. Let's talk about another definition, which I hope you adopt this in your life. It's a Japanese word that I learned a long time ago called Kaizen, and it's the art of continuous improvement. This may sound silly or it may sound superficial, but imagine if you could improve or help your teams improve just 1% per day. What would happen after 5 working months or 100 days? You'd have 100% improvement. But what I'd like to do before we start talking about how do you increase your treatment acceptance is I want to go back to some basics. Before I do though, is there anybody here that has questions on Zoom? And if you do, simply raise your hand in the panel. Or you could type your question as well when you raise your hand in the panel. Anything, Shay? Okay. So let's move forward. Back to basics. First things first, I'd like to talk about some very, very simple human psychology. And I think it's one of the things that we tend to forget. But my first question to you is, why do we do what we do? And a lot of people think human behavior is very complex, and I'll say that it is when you look at someone's history. But human behavior boils down to 2 very, very simple things. We either do things to seek pleasure, or we do things to avoid pain. And it's only one of those 2 things. Again, like I said, it's either to seek pleasure or to avoid pain. Now, I know a lot of you on this call would probably argue, no, there's a whole bunch of other reasons why I do things. But let me give you some very visceral examples. If a bad guy breaks into my house and points a gun at my wife, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump between the bad guy and my wife. Now, why would I do that? I would do that for 2 simple reasons. Number 1, to avoid the pain of something happening to her, and also the pleasure of hopefully having her around for a very long time. I'll go to a simple thing like flowers. Every once in a blue moon, I'll surprise my wife and buy her a dozen roses for no reason. Do I do that for her or do I do that for me? The reality is she's a beneficiary, but I do it for me because it allows me to seek pleasure. and also avoids the pain of, maybe I didn't do something right, but I'll leave that one alone. But if we actually acknowledge that everything we do is either to seek pleasure or to avoid pain, it's very hard to argue that. I know a lot of people's egos will dispute that, like I do things just for the good of others. But the reality is you do it because it makes you feel great. When you do something nice for someone else, it's wonderful. But that would mean that we're all selfish. And the fact of the matter is we are, but selfish is not a bad word. Because of my selfishness with my family, because of my selfishness with my wife and my friends, I do a tremendous amount for them. They're beneficiaries, but understanding that basic concept is the most necessary thing to help a patient accept treatment. That being said, I want to continue taking things to the next level. But if your patients knew what you knew, wouldn't you agree that they would always say yes to treatment? But the challenge is, I've seen this over and over where our providers are scratching their heads. They're like, wait, I told them everything, but they still didn't say yes to treatment. And the question is, what happened? And what happened is a classic example, and I'll use my wife as an example. I love my wife to death. We've been together for 26 years. She is the world that I revolve around, and she treats me incredibly well as well. And despite my best intentions, I never want to upset her. I never want to make her angry. I never want to hurt her feelings. But even with the best of intentions, I sometimes do. And it's not because I meant to, it's because something failed when it came to communication. That being said, how do we have quality communications with our patients that are meaningful? And just because you say something, it doesn't mean somebody understands something. Again, I'm going to go back to my wife. This was a few months ago. I'm heading home. My wife was near the pizza shop, and I said, hey, you know what? Pizza would be a great idea. And she said, what do you want? I said, I'd like a pie with pepperoni and with mushrooms. Half pepperoni, half mushrooms. Now, my wife didn't leave it there, and thankfully she didn't. And she said, do you want half with pepperoni and mushrooms and half plain, or do you want one half pepperoni and one half mushrooms? But that's a great example of how sometimes we fail so often on communications. And I think one of the things that we fail to realize is verbal versus non-verbal communications. Study after study after study after study shows that 76% of communication is tone and body language. And I want you to think about that. Tone and body language. And here's a great example. I want everyone to take a second to read this sentence. Now, depending on how I say this sentence, it can have totally different meanings. I could say something along these lines of, you are going to wear that pocketbook with that outfit. Or I could say, you're going to wear that pocketbook with that outfit. Or you're going to wear that pocketbook with that outfit. So tone has so much impact on meaning. And sometimes we're so busy formulating the words that we don't pay attention to what the other person is understanding. That being said, it's pretty obvious that communication 101, part of it is an art, but there's also a science to communication. And that's the part that I want to help us in this webinar focus on, because at the end of the day, I'll go back to what I said earlier. If your patients knew what you knew, they would always say yes to treatment. And I know we hear the same thing over and over again, oh, but they don't have the money. But you know what's interesting? I'll take a little bit of a sideline, and I would ask people out there, would you spend $100 on dinner? And a lot of you would say yes. But if that $100 was for a Whopper, you'd be pretty pissed off. On the other hand, if that $100 was for a 7-course meal with the finest wines, finest champagnes, and finest scotches that money could buy, you would think it's a steal. So it goes to building the value. But how can you build value if your patients don't know what it is that they're getting? So let's go to some basics on communication. None of us have a crystal ball. It's a joke I like to make very often. None of us have a crystal ball, but I would like to talk about the voyage that your patient takes when they go through the practice. Too often, that experience for patients may not be the same for every patient, and we wonder why some patients are upset and some patients are not. One of the things that I cannot recommend enough for everybody on this call is to map out for your office, what does that patient voyage look like? This way you can have consistency, because when you have consistency, it's a lot easier to see what's working and to see what's not working. But if we're just throwing stuff up against the wall, doing a spray and pray, how do you know what works? How do you know what doesn't work? And that's the question that I ask all of you. And I challenge all of you that are on this webinar. So there's no single magic wand that can make your treatment acceptance go up. But there are a whole bunch of little things that we can do. And it's kind of like falling in love, right? Imagine you meet the perfect partner. They're incredibly attractive. They're incredibly intelligent. They have a great career. And you go out to dinner for the first time, but they say just one thing that upsets you. You never get to that second date. And this is a relationship that we're trying to build with our patients. And you're only as great as their last experience at your office. And keep this in mind, only 18% of a patient's time is actually spent with the doctor. But you do have a key role when it comes to increasing your treatment acceptance. So let's go back to basic human psychology, right? If we understand the people that are coming into our offices and we know certain things about them in general, would you all agree that it gives them a leg up when it comes to actually communicating with them and gives you a leg up? Because the first statistic I want to share with you is 65% of the people walking through your front door are scared, nervous, or apprehensive. 65%. One of the things that we do at TLC to help alleviate that, and I know to some of you it might sound very strange, but before I go to the next slide, I have a question for all of you. I'm not talking about dentists or specialists that are your coworkers or peers, but when was the last time that you actually got a call from a doctor, for example, a physician? I can remember the last time I got one, and it was over a decade ago. So one of the things that we do is every single new patient that comes into the practice, our providers get emails on a regular basis, and they actually make a new patient phone call. Very seldom do the patients actually pick up the call, but they'll end up leaving a voicemail, and it's a little bit of an introduction saying, hey, we just wanted to welcome you to the practice. If you have any questions, here's the office number before you come in, but please don't hesitate to give us a call. Do you think that does anything for the patients when it comes to their apprehension or fear? And it absolutely does. It makes them feel more comfortable. It gives them that wow factor, and obviously it has an impact on treatment acceptance. I know this. I know 50% of new patients that schedule a visit in your office never make it for their first visit. Now, a lot of you are saying, oh, I don't have no-shows, or I have very little no-shows. And you're probably right, because most patients have the courtesy nowadays to give a phone call to say, I'm not coming. But if you speak to your front desk, you don't see the patients that schedule today for next Thursday that call up tomorrow and cancel that visit. But what we've learned is when we make those new patient phone calls, only 15% of those patients do not come into the practice. The other thing I want to talk about with communications is also technology, right? Tech plays a huge, huge part in communications. And how do you take advantage of that technology? Because when you have a modern platform that can communicate with your patients, I think the obvious thought that comes to the patient's mind is if they're this advanced on the communication side, they must be that advanced in the back of the house. One of the things that we utilize, and they are one of our sponsors today, but just so everyone on this call is aware, we are a CareStack platform user. But I've become a huge evangelist because the benefits that we've seen from using CareStack are phenomenal. Yes, we have a huge cost savings, probably about $1,000 a practice. Everything is integrated within CareStack, including the communication, the text messaging, and the patients have their own portal that they can log into. There's a whole host of features that as a practice principle are tremendously, tremendously powerful, but I'll leave that to you and CareStack to communicate about later. But they have amazing tools for our patients that make their lives easier. When we onboard a patient, the first thing they do is they get an email. They get a quick login to their portal. They fill out all their paperwork remotely, so we don't have people waiting in the reception area filling out paperwork for 15 or 20 minutes. We do all of their scheduling. Everything is fully integrated. But again, I leave that to the CareStack team when you guys decide to talk to them. But I do have to talk to you about a couple of favorites that our patients love. They love the convenience of confirming through their smart device. Now, there's a lot of third-party services that do that, but the absolute hands-down favorite, especially considering the pandemic, is patients and my staff absolutely love curbside check-in. We have nobody waiting in our waiting rooms. Basically, what happens is they get a text message about 20 minutes before their scheduled reservation. When they arrive, they hit a quick C on their cell phone. After they hit that C, we call them as soon as we're ready, and the patients go straight to the back. I also want to talk about communicating with our patients when it comes to Facebook, when it comes to Instagram and Pinterest. Do you think that those are great ways to communicate and set expectations for your patients ahead of time. Because when you do that, they get an idea of what your office is actually like. Now, we use digital resources. We use digital resource, excuse me. We've been using them for 4 years. When we first brought digital resource on board, we had about 85 followers on Facebook, and we thought we were special. 4 years later, we've got over 15,000. And last month alone, digital resources marketing efforts generated over 30 ortho starts. That doesn't include leads, and they've been doing an incredible job. Another thing that our patients absolutely love is something that we call live chat. We're on your website, and I'm sure we've all seen this. You go to a car dealership website or a whole numerous host of websites where you get a little pop-up. We've actually scheduled reservations for our patients through our live chat. But let's go back to the human communication, because at the end of the day, that is one of the most important things, because when you look at dentistry, we are the second most intimate medical profession that there is. I want you to think about that. We're the second most intimate medical profession there is, whereby you have a patient that's laid back, they're prone, you're in their mouth, they have no idea what you're doing, it feels funny, it sounds strange, it smells funny. Other than an OBGYN, proctologist, or urologist, we are the most intimate medical vertical there is. And you need to keep that in mind. And I think most people on this call would agree that we should treat others the way we would like to be treated. But I would counter that and totally disagree with that. I believe that the way we should treat people is the way they want to be treated. Again, Sharon, my partner in life, my best friend, if I treated my wife the way I wanted to be treated, I think we would have lasted 6 months. And I'm sure my wife could give you a few months on that one. But if we treat the other the way they want to be treated, that's how we have success in a relationship. And once we know how they want to be treated, let's think about animals, right? A cat loves to be rubbed on their ears. Maybe a dog does too. But a dog loves to be rubbed on his belly. But would you do that to a cat? It's a great way to get a bunch of claws into you very, very quickly. So how do we build that rapport? One way is to treat people the way they want to be treated. And I also believe in what I call CPR, which is courtesy, professionalism, and respect. But let's talk about how we can make a great first impression. The first question that I would ask all of you, this was a survey that was done at UCLA. It was 5,000 students. And they asked the 5,000 students, we want you to rate the following. Look at the following faces. Tell us who's the most confident. Let us know who is the most intelligent. And by the way, who is the sexiest? I want all of you to take a look at this real quick. Look at the 4 faces, and which one do you think is the most confident? Which one do you think is the most intelligent? And which one do you think is the sexiest? Well, the answer is none of the above. The answer, very simply, was this. Nothing will make you appear more intelligent, more confident, or sexier than a smile. And for those of you out there that think first impressions don't matter, one of the things that Steve, who is one of the principals at TLC, is an adamant supporter of is for us dressing for success. And I'm a firm believer of the same thing. For those of you that think first impressions don't make a difference, I want you to look at the following slide. And imagine this is going to be your dentist. Picture number 1. Picture number 2. If you think your first impression doesn't matter, please, please, please think again. Now, as we're talking about building rapport, one of the questions I always get, and one of the statements that we always get from our doctors is, I don't have time. I'm too busy. There's too many patients. And I would say to you, do you have 2 minutes to build rapport? Because there are 4 questions that can help you build rapport with a patient very quickly. And don't ever forget, it doesn't matter how much you know to somebody else. What matters is that you care. And once they know you care, then they'll want to know what you know. But here's 4 simple questions that you can use to get into rapport with your patients. Question number 1, where are you from? Great conversation starter. There are very few people, depending on what part of the country that you're in, that are from the local area, right? Another great question is, what brought you to Florida? Or if you're in another state, what brought you to Michigan? Or where are you from in Michigan? Another one is, what is your profession? What do you do for a living? And the 4th one, and another great conversation starter, married, kids, partner, significant other, or are you successfully single? Those questions can open up a 2-minute dialogue window, but It will create a bond with your patient that you will never, ever lose. We've all been to a doctor's office. We've all been treated like a number. And I know that a lot of you out here, a lot of you that are out here, I do know you personally as well. But you want to build that rapport, but sometimes you go right into the dentistry and you dehumanize that person on the other side. Don't do that. So let's go to treatment acceptance. One of the things we discussed earlier is how do you bifurcate the portion that is the clinical? In other words, determining whether a patient really wants to do that treatment or not. And once you know that whether the patient wants to do the treatment or not, how do you make it affordable for them? And that's what we're going to cover over the next few minutes. So how do you separate the clinical from the financial? You know, I go back to the story about Bob. How many times, and I will say this to everyone on this call, have you heard a patient saying something that you thought was a quote unquote buy signal? And what do? You do what I call spray and pray, right? You literally, hey, let's go get him a treatment plan and let's have someone with a high school diploma have a conversation about clinical aspects. Is that fair to your patient? Is that fair to you? Or would you rather have a much more targeted approach that will help a patient not be sold on treatment? Because if the patients knew what you knew, we all know they would say yes to treatment. But how do you get right on target? So let me go through a systematic approach that works incredibly well. And we have doctors in our practice, real numbers, that are doing 50 and 60% treatment acceptance. That being said, I think one of the most important things is value system. And let's talk about the value system. We talk about a lot of different things with our patients, but as humans, I go back to the golden rule. The golden rule is you treat other people the way you want to be treated. And in that golden rule, you'll also speak to people about things that are important to you. I go back to my wife, Sharon. Her and I have a lot of interests in common, but there's also certain things that I'm interested in that she has no interest in. So imagine I go to my wife, and my wife is not, I don't watch sports, and I know my wife loves that about me, but with the exception of Formula One and MotoGP. Now, can you imagine if I sit down with my wife who has no interest, she thinks it's loud, she thinks it's noisy, and it makes no sense, a bunch of grown men driving in circles as fast as they can. And I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that are laughing at that, but it's something I'm passionate about, something that I love. But I've learned I'm not going to talk to my wife about that, because if I do, she's tuned out, she's thinking about something else. I've got to get the laundry. What's for dinner? Are we going out? Where are we going for our next trip? But if I pick a topic that my wife enjoys, and my wife is a nurse, and we start talking about healthcare, or we start talking about dentistry, or we talk about things that we have a common interest in, we can have a conversation for hours, and she'll feel like I care. But if I start espousing things about what's going on in Formula One, my wife feels like she's just a board that I'm talking to, or a wall that I'm talking to. And that's not right to do to her. So let's talk about value systems, right? I call it language. If I speak to you in your language, if I speak to you in something that you're interested in, you and I can naturally have a conversation. So I want to go through the 5 core values that we've discovered in patients. Number 1, health and function. Number 2, cosmetic. Number 3, keeping teeth. Number 4, not losing teeth. And by the way, 3 and 4 are very, very different, even though they sound similar. But someone who's keeping teeth is someone who's moving towards pleasure. Someone who's afraid of losing teeth is someone who's already lost so many and they're coming from a place of scarcity. You would speak to those people differently. And number 5 is pain. Now keep something in mind, and this is what's really, really intriguing. When you look at the value system of doctors, right? Health and function is 90% of our doctors. And when I talk about value system, I'm talking about what's most important. Listen, all 5 things are important to everybody, but I'll use a car as an example, right? For some of you on this call, the most important thing to you in a car is looks. For some of you, it's performance. For some of you, it's gas mileage. For some of you, it's safety. I'm sure everybody on this call would love to get better gas mileage in their car, but maybe it's not the reason why you bought it, or maybe it is. So the second one, cosmetic, that we spoke about, that is about 2% of patients where that's their primary value. And I know a lot of you sitting here are having a hard time believing this, but this is data from the ADA. I go to keeping teeth. That's 2% of patients. Now, keep in mind, cosmetic and keeping teeth are important to people, important to doctors, but the primary value system for doctors, for the most part, hands down, is health and function. And all of you sitting out there probably looking at it, maybe challenging me, but then thinking, wait a second, yes, that is the first thing that's most important to me. And because it's most important to you, it's what you discuss most. But here's the irony, and I think the maker upstairs has a great sense of humor. When you look at patients, health and function is 5% of patients' primary value system. I'm not saying it's not important to them, but it's not their primary value system. It's spread apart pretty evenly between the other 2 through 5, which is cosmetic, keeping teeth, not losing teeth, and pain. Now, here's a really interesting side-by-side comparison, and I want you to take a look at that. 90% of doctors, their primary value system is health and function, yet it's only 5%. But here's a question for you. How many of us out there are talking about health and function when the patient might be more concerned about what are their cosmetics? Am I keeping my teeth? Am I losing my teeth? Pain. But that's something to be very, very mindful of. The next thing I want to talk to you about when it comes to language and when it comes to communicating with our patients is what I call modality, right? There are some people that are big picture people. I'm a great example. I'm primarily a big picture person, with the exception of dentistry. That's when I'll get very detailed. There are some people that are middle of the road, and there are some people that are very, very, very highly detailed. Now, in dentistry, every dentist on this call went to school to learn how to become very detailed when it comes to dentistry. But the reality of the situation is, if you are speaking to a big picture person and giving them all the little details, that person is going to be sitting in a chair like, hey, I'm not stupid, I get it. But conversely, if you're a big picture person and the person sitting in your chair wants all the details and you don't give them all those little details, they're going to think that you don't care enough to give them all the information they need. Now, here's a really big question for you. How do you find out? Because I hear people say this over and over. Oh, I'm a great read on people. And by the way, I'm sure that you are. But here's the challenge I have for you. If you have somebody who's scared, nervous, apprehensive, on their guard, can you read somebody who is not being themselves? There are some people that when they're nervous talk a lot. There are other people when they're nervous don't speak at all. So don't make the presumptions. Bring it down to a science. One of the things that we do is when patients come into our practice, one of the first questions they get when they arrive at the front desk for the first time is we ask them this question: what's most important to you about your teeth? Not what's most important about how they look or how they feel. What's most important to you? And most patients look at us like we're crazy. And our response to them is always the same. And my thought process is a little bit of shock, because how can you as the doctor, how can we as a dental practice take the best care of our patients possible if we don't know what's important to them? And then when it comes to modality, when the doctor is ready to explain treatment, the doctor typically will say to the patient, hey, we're about to go through a lot of things. Do you want the big picture? Do you want the middle of the road? Or do you want all the little details? And it makes for much more effective communication. And I think that makes sense to most people on this call. The other part of treatment planning is co-diagnosis. Get your patient involved, but please don't use words that they don't understand. I will never forget, I was chairside with a doctor. This was probably about 10 years ago. We have a patient that comes in, 23 years old, hasn't seen a dentist since high school. Doctor sits him down, doctor starts looking at his teeth and says, oh my God, we need to get you a prophy. And the kid, without skipping a beat, says, what's a prophy? He goes, we need to give you a prophylaxis. And the gentleman says, again, without skipping a beat, what does a condom have to do with my mouth? And by the way, that's a true story. And I can assure you that doctor never used the word prophylaxis in front of a patient again. The other thing that I want everyone on this call to be mindful of, and you probably did this today, you had a patient in your office, sitting in your chair, leaned all the way back, and you were standing over them. Do you think that's intimidating? One of the things that we teach our team members to do is lower your chair so you're below eye level with them, so you make the patient comfortable. The other thing that's incredibly important is as you're going through your prognosis and letting the patient know about what's about to happen, most of us on this call, most of you on this call, I should say this properly, go through the benefits of the patient getting the treatment done now. But one of the things that I've seen over time, and I get it, right? You're a doctor, you have a patient coming into your chair, and you'll hear it anywhere from 0 to 10 times a day where they say to you, doc, no offense, nothing against you, but I hate dentists. So as humans, we have a natural desire to want to please people. But that being said, don't be afraid to tell a patient the consequences of not getting the treatment. I hope all of you are looking at this picture, because this patient in this picture was originally a patient of another dentist that didn't have the courage to tell them. A patient like this could actually be sitting in your chair And that could be them 20 years from now if we don't have the courage to tell them the consequences. Now, here's the most important part as you're going through the whole process with a patient. One of the things that is very rare to happen, but I go back to my wife again. When I asked for that pizza, I told her I wanted half pepperoni and half mushrooms. My wife was smart enough to have me repeat back what it is that I wanted. One of the things that's missing is we often don't have the patient tell us what are the benefits to you getting the treatment done now. And if you start asking that question, you will be shocked. You will be shocked at what some of your patients say, because you may have told the patient yellow, 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 and you say, hey, what color did I say? They'll tell you green, 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 which it's a great direct feedback loop. And benefits, just like pleasure, create a desire for somebody to do something, but maybe not necessarily right away. The consequences, when they repeat the consequences to you, that's when it becomes very real for them. And one of the questions that you should always ask a patient, tell them my front desk, my treatment coordinator, Larry, Susie, Mo, Curly, whoever it is that you have at the front, let them know that they're great at making treatment affordable. But other than money, is there anything else you need to know to move forward? Do not ask the question, what's stopping you? Because until you ask that question, nothing was stopping them. But I promise you, they will think of something very, very quickly. And the question is, how do you get a commitment from the patient that they're ready to move forward with treatment? And think about the benefit. What if you knew without a shadow of a doubt that the patient truly wanted to move forward with that treatment? Because money is not the part. And then when they bring up money, say, listen, money is a real big issue. It's the elephant in the room. And my front desk, my treatment coordinator, is great at making treatment affordable. Before we even have a financial conversation, are you ready to move forward? And what else do you need to know if you're not? And at that point, this is where you get the real commitment from the patient, not the yes, not the fact that they've told you the benefits, not the fact that they've given you the consequences. It's getting them on your schedule and creating that sense of urgency where you say, patient, I have an opening on July 17th. Do you prefer morning or afternoon? And we're going to need 2 hours for this procedure. If they turn around and say, oh, I have to check my calendar, I don't know about you guys, but I think all of us keep our calendar right here, right? So if they're waffling, don't let go. Get them to commit clinically or ask them the right questions. And then from there, once you get them on the calendar, and only then, that's when you start building your treatment plan. And I'm talking about your front desk building your treatment plan. One of the things that I definitely want to commend CareStack, and as I said before, I've become a huge evangelist of theirs. We literally spit out treatment plans in 2 minutes flat. So we don't have patients waiting 15 minutes or 30 minutes chairside while someone's trying to put together a treatment plan. But I want to switch gears now, and I want to go over to the financial conversation that's going to happen at your front desk. And please do not make the mistake of telling your patients how much something costs, because if you tell them too much and their insurance covers this, they'll think you were trying to rob them. If you tell them too little and we find out their insurance doesn't cover it, you're going to look like a liar again. Let your front desk do what they're best at. But let's talk about money for a second. I want to go back to Human Psychology 101, and I want you to imagine that you are in the situation. So imagine that this is you, right? You walk out to a parking lot, it's the middle of the day, there's nobody in the parking lot, and you see $1 lying on the floor. What do? You pick it up and you put it in your pocket. Now imagine I come by, I don't physically violate you, but I take that $1 out of your pocket. What are you feeling right now? You're feeling like that was mine. And as humans, we've been taught from birth that money is something to possess and not give up to anybody. And we're only talking about $1. How do you think a patient feels when you turn around and tell them it's $2,500? And I know there are all these schools of thought out there that says, oh, you should be comfortable telling a patient it's $5,000. I'm sorry, but if you're on the other side and I haven't created value yet, and I turn around and tell you that, hey, this Whopper is going to cost you $100, you know what you're going to feel like, right? You're going to feel like that, and you're also going to feel like this. Imagine a $5,000 treatment plan. If you say it so callously, the patient will think, oh my God, this person has no clue about money. I want to give you guys some basic, we have a Q&A question, Shay. Stand by 1 second. We'll talk about that one later. But moving forward, imagine if this were you. So, average American, these are statistics from Dr. Google. 66% of Americans live in a home that is owned. Average cost of a home today is $247,000. The average age of a car in the United States is 39 months, and the average price of a car is $36,000. But here's the real shocker. The average savings account is $2,729. How do people afford it? And we all know what the answer to that one is. They do financing, right? How do they afford it? And one of the things that I find really interesting, and I don't know what the latest stats are, but I know that as of 2 years ago, 75% of patients were not aware that they had patient financing for dental treatment. Now, imagine you make treatment affordable. If you tell somebody something's $5,000 and they've got $2,700 in savings, the first thing out of their mouth is pull the tooth. But what if you covered up the $5,000? And I'm not saying cover it up, but what if you started with, hey, you have a couple of options when it comes to paying for your treatment. Option number one, you're looking at roughly $74 a month if you qualify. There's a range depending on where your credit rating comes in. But keep in mind that this is a soft credit pull, so there'll be no impact to your credit. Or if you'd like, you could pay the $5,000 in full. Do you think that will get your patients to say yes? I know in our case it does. I know that at TLC, roughly 28% of our revenues are through patient financing. Green Sky has been an amazing partner for us over the years, and they've been incredibly helpful. This gives you the very distilled version of how do you get patients to say yes to treatment, but there is a lot more to go through, but our 1 hour doesn't allow it. So we're wrapping up a little bit early, but I ask all of you, not for my sake, but for your benefit, what are your 2 biggest takeaways in this webinar so far? And then the next question for you, not for me, is how are you going to apply it? How are you going to use it in the workplace? Because if you actually do you think if you apply what you've learned, you could become unstoppable? So now I'll open it up to the Q&A. And let me take a look at this real quick, and let's see what questions we have. One of the other things that we could do too is we could possibly open up the microphones, but with all the people here, I think that might be a little bit distracting.
Sasha, the question we have here is, will we be able to watch this recording again later?
Excuse me, that's a great question. One of the things that we are going to do is we are going to make this available for all the attendees.
Sasha, this is Jim here. There's a question as a facilitator here. Someone posed a question that they've got a large clinical staff, and how do you recommend, coming from a group yourself, tonality? You spoke about tonality being so important. When you have so many different people under one roof, how do you get a handle on the tonality and the body language, the presentation styles? What are some recommendations you can make?
So the first step is training, and it's training the group as a whole. It's training your leadership and making people socially aware. And a great way to do that, a great way to do that with your team members is to actually put them in a room and experiment with one sentence. And I love using the sentence, you are going to wear that pocketbook with that outfit. And they can use so many different tones. And using those different tones, people become very well aware. But I think one of the more important things to address is addressing what people's value systems are, so you can speak to them about what's important to them, and also finding out what their modality is. Because if you're a big picture person, I give you 1,001 details, you're going to check out.
Great, thanks for addressing that. Shay, anything else on your end that you have there?
I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. If anyone has any, please type them in the chat. We'd love to answer them.
Yeah, we've got a good turnout here, so I really want to encourage people to be interactive and not just sit on their hands and listen to Shay and Sasha for this, hour and 45.
Yeah, Sasha, you provided a lot of great information at that seminar. I know I learned a ton. I think I learn more and more every time I hear you give these topics and this information. So for all you out there, please don't hesitate to ask. We actually do have a question that popped up. Thank you so much, Philip. Doesn't the dentist decide on the treatment sequence and treatment plan, not the front office? From Philip.
Well, that is 100% true that the doctor always decides the sequence and what the treatment plan is. But the doctor doesn't decide in absentia. That decision is made with and alongside the patient. Sometimes there are financial considerations, sometimes there are health considerations, but 100% at the end of the day, it's up to the doctor. But the doctor is the one giving the treatment plan to the front, and the front is the one who's actually putting it together. But that's a great question, Philip.
We got another question from Nick. Given all the PPE, masks, shields we have to put on now, what are some ways to still make that first 7-second impression with professionalism?
I'm going to ask that question back at you, but if I had a face mask on, could you tell whether I was smiling or not? And a smile is one of the best ways to open up the door to anybody. And it is a lot more difficult with PPE, 100%, but it's something that we have to overcome. And remember, 76% of communication is tone and body language. What does your tone sound like? What does your body language look like? Are you all tense, or are you sitting back relaxed, and are your eyes smiling?
Sasha, I have a question. What else are you doing regarding COVID and your messaging within the office? What are you telling patients? I've been getting those questions a lot myself.
So one of the biggest things that we're doing is, since COVID started, we put together a couple of videos, and everyone here is welcome to go up to our Facebook pages, and you're welcome to plagiarize the videos. Obviously, use your own people, not ours. But we put a ton of videos out there showing patients what we're actually doing in the office and what steps we're taking. Instead of sending out another email blast, which I know all of us are COVID emailed to death, and a lot of us are probably Zoomed out to death, but we put videos together. Look at our Facebook pages. It's TLC Dental Fort Lauderdale, TLC Dental Coral Springs. You'll see a bunch of videos that are out there that are informational for our patients, and we've got a ton of views on them, and patients are very appreciative of that. Harold, you asked the question if there was a recording of the seminar. We will be providing everyone on this call with a link to a recording of the seminar.
Hey, Sasha, a question here about case presentation and teledentistry and your thoughts on that. So I guess the person's asking that they're trying to do some case presentation, and what, do you have any kind of suggestions on if you're going to use teledentistry? How do you change your approach for doing it versus in person?
To answer the question, there are a couple of different ways that we use teledentistry. Number one, in the height of COVID, and CareStack had all this seamlessly built in, which was amazing. But in the height of the COVID thing, we were using teledentistry to pre-screen patients to determine whether we really needed to bring them in or not. But one of the little things that we found with teledentistry is we're using a lot for post-ops where it's not necessary, where it's not absolutely necessary for a patient to come in, where a post-op can just be a Q&A with the doctor. When it comes to the case presentation, though, that's one of those things that are much better off done in person and or done with a patient side by side. Obviously, we're wearing PPE because there are a ton of questions that are very difficult to do on an iPhone. Conversely, a post-op is real easy to do when we're doing teledentistry.
Great. One more question here, Sasha. I mean, this is from someone who joined kind of late, but I think we maybe brushed over this. Can both you and Shay give maybe a 30-second bio on your background, a little bit more about TLC Dental, just who you are? That's what this person's asking.
So one of the things I would strongly suggest, and I'm not saying this to deflect, but my bio is up on tlcdental.com. I think there are other things that people may much rather hear, but I appreciate the flattery. But they're welcome to look at my bio on tlcdental.com. And Shay, he'll give you a quick little background on him when he comes up. It's interesting though, we just got a question, Shay, that I think is for both of us actually. How do you start using social media to attract more patients for cosmetic treatments? And I would think that would be a perfect segue. The timing couldn't be better. Shay, why don't you take over the presentation and we'll go forward from there. And by the way, thank you to all of you for doing what you do. One of the things that I think people take for granted is all of you on this call are on the front line. And we have an obligation and responsibility to keep people away from the emergency rooms and from the urgent care centers. So I applaud every one of you that's had the courage to serve our community because they've served us well for so many years. Thank you, all of you.
Perfect. Sasha, thank you so much. Again, it's always really great to hear your presentation here. I learn more every single time. Thank you everyone for being on our Zoom call today. Sasha with TLC gave us a lot of great information on how to get better treatment acceptance, how our numbers can easily affect our practices, and how we can grow by working smarter and not always harder, even though I do like both sometimes. Today, I'm going to talk with you I'm going to answer the question about social media in my presentation, so I hope you all stick around. So give me one moment here while I share my screen and get what we've got up on the calendar here, or up on the screen here. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Great. We got a little background on myself. Let me hide my picture because I don't like to look at myself while I speak. My name is Shay Berman. I'm the president of Digital Resource. We're an internet marketing agency based out of West Palm Beach, Florida. I started Digital Resource 6 years ago. I was just a guy on my couch trying to make marketing happen. When I actually met Sasha, as he was coaching a ton of dental practices at the time. I got my first chance at the dental office, and over the last 6 years, we've grown to 55 full-time team members, over 450 dental practices nationwide. And so we do a lot every day with dentists. We learn a lot every day with dentists. And today I'm here to show you how we can bring in more of the cases we want, how we can bring in more new patients, and how we can stay in touch with our patients through social media. I'm also going to bring up some things regarding COVID, how some of our messaging has changed, and what you can do online to better make your patients comfortable as they come into your practice, as they make those phone calls, set those appointments. So Sasha, as I did for you, if there's questions that come up, I love to be interrupted, guys. I prefer a more conversational tone. So please ask questions as we go through, and I'll be glad to answer them. So we're going to talk about 5 different topics today. The first one being websites, also search engine optimization, social media marketing, internet advertising in regards to Facebook and Google ads, as well as Instagram, and also live chat. Now, if I could see you all in person, one of the first questions I would always ask is, how many of you believe you have a great website? How many of you believe you have a website that represents who you are as a practice, that's fast, mobile responsive, and has all the content that you need to show your patients who you are in the culture of your practice? And a lot of times we see it quite a bit, but it's not everyone. So what makes a great website? Well, a great website, first and foremost, should be mobile responsive, meaning that it's designed for mobile phones, tablets, computers, and that no matter the device you're on, it's always going to keep that original beauty it was designed with. So check out your website on a mobile device, make sure it shows up well, because it's surprising to know that 30% of your website traffic comes from a mobile phone. So if for some reason your website is hard to see or doesn't look right on a phone, you're actually not giving a great user experience or patient experience online to these visitors that you have. Another thing about websites is website speed. When I say website speed, the first thing that probably comes to mind is I've been on a website before that was slow and I hated it, right? It's so frustrating, and we all feel that frustration when we get to a slow website. So I would urge you all to check out GT Metrics or Google Page Speed Grader, which are 2 great tools that will allow you to grade the website speed of your own website. When you run it through these tools, it's going to give you a load time. Typically, a load time of 5 to 7 seconds is okay, not really great. 3 to 5 seconds is good. And if you have a load time at 3 seconds or faster, it's really, really great. So yes, a slow website load time can give a poor patient experience and can cause them to do what? It's going to cause them to possibly leave your site. So if you've done so much to get someone to your website, whether it's internal marketing, external digital marketing, billboards, radio, Facebook ads, no matter how they got there, if they get there and have a bad experience because it's not mobile responsive or fast, there's a chance that they go back and go down the next one on their list on their insurance plan, the next one on the list on Google, the other flyer that was in the mail. And so make sure your website's fast for that user experience. But let me give you a little secret. Google also cares about your website speed. And why should they? Well, Google wants to give a great search experience to every single website user. And if Google is serving results that lead to poorly built or slow websites, you're actually going to have lower rankings because Google doesn't want you showing up as a first result if you're going to be slow. Now, there's a whole bunch more I could say about websites, but I want to give everyone here a really great tip. If for some reason now or in the future you're looking to redo your website, I highly suggest a few things. Number 1, get your website built on WordPress. Why would you want it built on WordPress? Well, because WordPress is it's a management platform for websites that you're going to be able to own. So whether or not you want to switch to another marketing company in the future or self-host and self-manage your website down the road, you can be able to take that website with you. And now I won't name any names, but there's many marketing companies out there, especially in the dental world, where you pay a little bit of money or sometimes no money for a website and you lease that website. And when you stop paying for it, they take that website away from you. A website is an asset to your practice, and you want to be able to own it and take it with you if for some reason the relationship with your marketing agency or the people who build that website ends up souring. Another reason why you want to build your website on WordPress is because it is great for search engine rankings. If you want to rank on the first page of Google, you want to have a WordPress website because that is the platform that Google actually prefers when ranking a website. They prefer it on WordPress. And third and foremost is that if you have a WordPress website, it has all the functionalities in the world. No matter what kind of software you're using, no matter what kind of functionalities you want to add to the website, no matter how you want to update it, a WordPress website will have those capabilities. Now, I want to put a little COVID spin on everything here today because I think it's very relevant to all of us. How can we show our patients and potential patients that we are doing a great job at keeping our practices safe and that we're doing a great job cleaning and that they can come in and feel comfortable? The dental office can already be a scary enough place and we don't want to scare them even more. So I always suggest if you could have a little pop-up when your website opens saying what your COVID procedures are, if you could have a little bar at the top of your website saying that you are obviously open for service and that what you're doing for COVID and the different cleaning things that are happening and the different PPE you put in place, that's very helpful as well. So we'll talk about some more things with COVID and social media, but if you can put those messages on your website now, there's a great segment of the population that would really appreciate to see that messaging. So search engine optimization. You guys, as I skip through these sections, don't hesitate to ask those questions in the Q&A. I'd love to answer them. But I will get to search engine optimization here, and it's something I'm very passionate about, and one of the main reasons I started Digital Resource 6 years ago. What is search engine optimization, though? Search engine optimization is a process of getting your website to rank on the first page of Google organically. Now, I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen here, but these top 4 results are paid advertising, Google Ads, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. These results here in the map section and the section just below the map, that is where SEO gets you to. That's called organic rankings, with this being localized organic and this being what we call worldwide organic. The only difference being is that the localized ones in the map will actually show you results that are a little bit closer to you than just any old result within your geographic area. But how can SEO assist your practice? Why should you care about being on the first page of Google? Well, if you want new patients, it's so important to know that in the average city in our country, there are tens of thousands of searches happening every single month for dentists or dental related services, where people are actually looking for a dentist or dental related services right through Google. So on the first page of Google, we have 18 options. And if we're not one of those 18, maybe we're on page 2. Do you think we're going to get seen? Less than 1% of people go to page 2. So if we're not on page 1, there's absolutely no chance, for the most part, that we're going to be seen by these tens of thousands of people searching every month for our practice. Now, if we get seen on Google, that drives traffic to our website. We're able to look at our reviews, see who we are, judge whether or not we're a practice they're comfortable with, and then decide to make that decision to make their appointment come into the practice. I promise you all that this will be the most boring slide that I have today, but I think it's so important that we all understand how search engine optimization works. One of the first things we have to look at when wanting to prove to Google we deserve to be on the first page organically is claim all of our listings. We have Google, we have Yelp, we have Yellow Pages, we also have HotFrog, City Search, YP, all these other listings out there that Google cares about us being on. And so I highly recommend that all of you look into the tool Yext, yext.com, and you pay monthly, but it updates all of these directory listings, allows you to put your name, your phone number, your logo, your website information, and also monitor and track your reviews through this listing. But the biggest thing is that Google cares that your listings are correct. Number 2, having original content on your website. Many of you may have noticed on other websites before in the dental space that someone's implant page has the same content as someone else's implant page. And while that's of course not great because it doesn't make you seem unique, it's also not great because Google will penalize you for having plagiarized content. And that's what Google considers it. We also want appropriate meta information through the website. For example, if on our implant page, we have a picture of someone getting an implant or an implant itself, we want to be able to tag that image with a meta description about implants and also the city that the practice is located in to let Google know what that image is about. That metadata can also be placed throughout other pages of the website, in your content, in your meta titles, and also the descriptions of your pages that Google uses to categorize what your content is focused on. I also suggest having 300 to 500 words at a minimum per page on your website. If you don't, there are many of your competitors who do or will in the future, and whoever has the longest content with the most depth and gives the most authority on their topics is going to end up ranking the best. It's also important to link your social media pages. So if I have my website and I have my social media, and my website links to my social media links to my website, we're actually telling Google that this is our social media. What we're doing over here, please give us credit for, and it'll allow you to build up your rankings and your trust with Google. Participating in social media is so important. And it's about 30% of Google's ranking factors on how to get to the first page of Google. So if you're trying to do search engine optimization, or you've tried in the past, and social media wasn't a part of that mix of online marketing, there's a great chance you didn't see success because social media wasn't being done correctly. We recommend posting daily, posting about the keywords that you want to be showing up on Google for, and making sure that you're always growing in your engagement and your following on social media week over week. As TLC, Sasha mentioned just before, they originally had about 80 followers or so. Now they're at 15,000. 84 followers and now at 15,000. And yes, that's a lot of growth. And yes, it was over a good period of time. But if we're not looking at that growth at a week over week basis, we're missing out on what Google's looking for to give us those rankings online. I also recommend blogging. And I'll give you guys a very quick and easy example. Many of my clients come to me asking for implant patients. That's what they want. They want to place more implants. So what if we wrote a blog called How to Find the Best Implant Dentist in Atlanta? Atlanta's Best Implant Dentist. Well, literally anyone who searched that question, how to find the best implant dentist in Atlanta, may find our blog, end up on our website, and now we're a potential option for that patient. Or anyone who searches implant dentist in Atlanta may also just find that blog too. And at the very, very least, Google is giving us credit for having more and more of our keywords placed throughout the website, more content, and us building authority and creating content around the keywords that matter to us. Content and authority is huge, especially in the healthcare space when it comes to Google rankings now. I want to dive into social media marketing, and I want to make it very simple for all of us. There are so many social media networks out there, and it can get overwhelming. And I'm putting in front of us today Facebook and Instagram as the most used social networks, and they are. And I would say they're the most used in dentistry as well. If you're a pediatric dentist or an orthodontist, I would actually suggest including Pinterest in this marketing mix. But things like TikTok, Snapchat, LinkedIn, while they're great social media platforms in general, they're not the social media platforms I recommend focusing your efforts on. Facebook and Instagram is where you're going to have the most engagement, the most reach, and you're going to be able to attract the most new patients through. When a patient who typically would go and check your reviews online goes to your website, they're also looking to see what you're doing on social media. So why do we use social media? I'll jump to this page. We use social media for a few reasons for our clients, just like TLC. We use social media to tell our culture, who our people are, who our doctors are, who our staff is, who is our practice. The who is what we call it. Number two, we do it to increase treatment acceptance. For patients that are already a patient of the practice or a patient that has been given a treatment plan, we're able to stay in front of them every single day by creating these posts that are engaging and fun and telling the story of our practice. We can increase that treatment acceptance. We can increase referrals by getting more of our current patient base to see us every day and us stay top of mind. And we can also drive new patient leads. When someone comes from an insurance plan, or someone comes from online marketing, a billboard, radio, TV, a flyer, and they go to check us out, they can see who we are, and there's a better chance that we convert them to a phone call, to that new patient lead, than the practice down the street who isn't engaging in social media. But how do we engage in social media? What do we post? Well, in front of us today, I have 3 examples. And I bet you can tell the example on the left and the right are very different from the one in the middle. Can anyone guess what that difference is? Well, the difference here is the ones on the outside are very generic, right? It's obvious. One has 6 likes, one has 3 likes, one has 170 people reached, one has 153. Those are very generic posts. You know, they might be fun for a little holiday thing. They might be fun every once in a while to fill in our content. But what do we see in the middle? We see people. Number one, we see real people. It reached 4.3 thousand people, 14 likes and a share. And this was not a boosted post. This was all organic reach. And what does better than people? People in video. So whenever you can, you want to be building custom curated content from inside your practice in the form of real people, whether it be your staff, the doctors, patients, whatever it is. I tell some of my clients, if your staff member goes on a ski trip, get a picture of your hygienist skiing. If you love doing something in your personal life, put it out there. You know, be you, tell your story, because people want to know the people, the who behind the practice. Now, before I get off of social media marketing, I also want to talk about the COVID spin here. I said that you should update your website with a pop-up or a little bar at the top of your website telling what your PPE increase looks like, or how your cleaning procedures are being handled, or how patients are being checked in curbside possibly. That's a huge piece. But telling that same message through your social media is important. So if you can sprinkle in a message, you know, that you can pin to the top of your social media, if you do a nice video explaining what's going on in your practice, if you can make your current patient base and that future patient base who's looking to come to you more comfortable, we're going to convert more of those patients who see us into actual new patient leads now. So do not be afraid to be you, be real, and create off the cuff real content that's raw. You don't have to make it perfect, but get content out there and make sure it's of you and of the people in your practice. So I want to talk about internet advertising here. And we have 2 different forms. 2 different forms we're going to talk about today are Facebook ads and Google ads. But what are internet ads and how are they different from what we've just talked about? Well, internet ads are paid placements on different media platforms. In this case, we're either paying for placement on Google or we're paying for placement on Facebook and Instagram. Unlike search engine optimization, which is earned by doing the right things in Google's eyes, we have the ability to get to Google by paying to be there. But I'm going to start with Facebook. And this screenshot here is a little example of what's in the back end of the Facebook advertising dashboard. You can see you can target people based on their city, based on their age and their gender. You see that little drop down that says more demographics? There are literally thousands of targeting parameters in here that you can use to the benefit of your practice, to the benefit of bringing in more new patients that didn't even know you existed the day before. And yes, Facebook is the most powerful advertising platform in the world. To give you a little example here, I have a pediatric practice. They're looking for new patients. Who do we target? Well, we pick the zip code that the practice is in, ages 32 to 55, women, and moms of grade school kids, moms of high school kids, moms of preschool kids. Literally, there's no better target than these people right here, these moms who are looking to bring their kids to a new pediatric practice. And so what else can we do? I want to share with you guys a few other fun examples. I have a client who's in Atlanta. He loves riding Harleys. We got him on a video in front of his Harley, inviting new patients to the practice, saying, hey, I love Harleys, come on in. And you know what we did? We put a small budget, $350 over 30 days. And we targeted people within a 15-mile radius who loved Harley Davidson and motorcycle riding. He got so many calls of patients saying, you know what, that's my kind of dentist. I want to go to a guy that loves what I love. I have another dentist. She loves the equestrian scene. We put her on a video right next to her horse, inviting new patients to the practice and saying how much she loves her horse and that's her hobby. And we targeted the equestrian scene in Wellington, Florida. And we did one more that I'll share with you as well. I have a practice here in Florida as well. It's 2 doctors. One went to Florida State University. One went to the University of Florida, Seminole and Gator. Well, what we did here is we had one doctor saying how much he loves the Florida State Seminoles, that's his school, and inviting all those patients to the practice. And the other doctor saying the exact same thing, but about the University of Florida. The cool thing here is that the patients we targeted who went to the University of Florida or like the University of Florida, who live within a 10-mile radius of the practice, they only saw the University of Florida video. And the patients that were advertised the Florida State video, they only saw that video. And what are we doing here? We are finding what makes us unique. what we're passionate about as a practice owner, as a dentist, as a office. And we are putting out there ourselves and attracting the patients that are most like us. By creating that bond online, by finding that niche, that thing that makes us special, but also connects us to other individuals, we're able to bring in more qualified leads to the practice. And that's just a few examples of the niche marketing that you can do, but I guarantee that every single one of you have something that's unique about yourselves, about your practice, a hobby, something that you love, that you can put on video, shoot it raw, off the cuff, 20, 30 seconds on your iPhone, put it on Facebook, find the appropriate targeting with the right messaging and the right offer to bring new patients into your practice. And I know Sasha mentioned that last month, even during COVID, TLC Dental was able to have 30 ortho starts. And we did that using this exact technique. 103 leads and 30 ortho starts last month during the pandemic. So you guys, it's about the right video, the right messaging, the right offer, and the right targeting to match. When you put that all together, you can be generating leads through Facebook for as little as $5 a lead. It's absolutely amazing, but you have to put yourself out there and you have to give it a try, or you'll never find out. And I'm gonna talk more about this in a second, but tracking is so, so important. We're gonna come back to that. Now, Google advertising. So I mentioned through search engine optimization, we're able to do the things that Google loves to bring us to the first page of Google in that map section, the section below the map. And that takes time. We have to prove to Google that we're doing the right things, we're doing it for the long run, and that we deserve to be there. So how can we be on the first page of Google now while we're waiting for our SEO to kick in? Well, Google ads are what I could really say for our clients is what we should do to be bringing those patient leads in while the SEO is kicking in. But Google ads are not for everyone. Google ads are for the practice that wants to bring in more implants, more cosmetic cases, more emergency, more Invisalign, and in certain areas, more general patients. Now, what are those first four case types? What do they have in common? Emergency, Invisalign, cosmetic, implants. These patients know what they want. They want a better looking smile. They want a healthier smile. They want, they're in pain. They want emergency service. So these patients know what they want now, and they're more likely to convert. Once they see your ad, they land on your landing page and they give you a call. What else do they have in common? They're also high return on investment value pieces to your practice. Implants, cosmetic, Invisalign, veneers. These are things that are going to bring a lot of dollars back to your practice. So one new patient would be a huge ROI. So Google Ads allows us to get to the first page of Google immediately, drive them to a landing page where we have a tracking phone number. That tracking phone number is a middleman number that sends patients to this number, but then directly to the practice. Your practice picks up the phone just like anything else, but this allows you to do two things. Number one, evaluate your front desk. I had a case about 3 years ago. We generated 63 new leads in 1 month for implants to a practice in Miami, Florida. And they weren't able to convert one of them. And we found out that the front desk person, after listening to the phone calls, was horrible on the phone, rude. And they weren't able to convert any because of that reason. And so your marketing will be affected by the people who answer the phone, to Sasha's point. Answer the phone with a smile, handle those calls correctly. But let's say we do get a great amount of phone calls. We do get a great amount scheduled. They do come into the practice. They do accept treatment and they do pay you. We have to track what our return on investment is in terms of dollars. So whether your marketing is coming from your social media, your Facebook or Instagram ads, or Google advertising, you have to work with a great company or a great team, if you plan on doing it yourselves, to be able to look at the leads that come in and use your patient management software, like a CareStack, to track the leads that are coming in to make sure your return on investment from your digital marketing is at least 5x. Because when it comes to marketing online for dental practice, you should be getting 5 times your money on everything that you do, or something's wrong. There's a breakdown in the messaging, there's a breakdown of how the phone calls are coming through, or there's a breakdown on how that treatment is being accepted within the practice. Now I wanted to get to our last topic, which is live chat, and something, again, I'm extremely passionate about since I brought it up 3 years ago when we started this as a service. If it's okay with you guys, I want to tell you a little story. So one of my clients, I'm going to call him Dr. Bob to keep his information private. Dr. Bob was killing it. He was getting about 20 phone calls a day, doing a ton of marketing online. He was actually doing a little bit of TV as well. And Dr. Bob said to me, Shay, what else can we do? We're doing great, but there's got to be more. I want more. He was always hungry for more, always willing to be a guinea pig on new projects. I said, Dr. Bob, I have live chat on my website. Why don't we try putting live chat on yours? And Susie at the front desk will, she'll take it on. So what we did is we put live chat on his website. We sat Susie down. We showed her how to use it. We said, Susie, whenever someone chats with you, respond back. There's a lot of patients on here that we're not capitalizing on. We're getting 20 calls a day, but we have 200 visitors a day. Where are those rest of these patients or potential patients going? Susie says, okay. And 30 days later, I come back all excited to talk to Dr. Bob. Like, Dr. Bob, you had like 75 conversations. This was amazing. Live chat killed it. And he goes, whoa. Stop for a moment. He goes, I got 3 bad reviews from my live chat. Live chat was horrible. It was the worst idea you ever had. I said, what do you mean? Well, long story short, we looked through those chats. We looked at the conversations. And let me just say, Susie, who'd been there for 15 years, she was very unhappy with getting a new job in terms of managing live chat on a website. To the extent that when someone said, I'd like to make a new appointment, or I'd like to make an appointment, she would say, you don't know how to pick up the phone? It was horrible, shocking, I know. And you'd all be surprised to hear that she is still at the practice. She was given a pass on just not loving that job. So I said, Dr. Bob, you had 75 conversations. Susie's not the right fit for this. She doesn't have the time. Clearly, she doesn't want to do this. Let me bring it in-house. And I've got a team that's here 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and we'll manage that. So 30 days later, I came back in. We had just about the same amount of messages as before, but the difference now was that we had 35 more leads that we never had before. So not only did Dr. Bob keep his same 20 phone calls per day for new patients he was getting, and almost all these were implant patients, but he increased the effectiveness of his marketing by bringing 35 more leads that he would have not otherwise had if live chat wasn't there. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, young people do live chat. I want implants. It's an older generation. It's an older population. You'd be surprised to know that he is a mostly implant full mouth rehab practice, and his average patient age is 63 years old. And yes, they were using live chat. I was so surprised myself. So today we have about 250, maybe almost 300 practices on our live chat software now, where 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, we are initiating the conversations with your website visitors. We are getting more people to convert from your website who would otherwise drop off and be dead visitors to the website. We email them to your front desk, and we follow up to your front desk with a phone call. We say, hey, we just sent you a live chat lead. Check your email right now, and as soon as you hang up with us, pick the phone back up, call that live chat lead, and schedule that reservation, schedule that appointment with them that they're looking to have. And why does live chat work? Many of you are probably going to say, well, because we're popping up, we're engaging in conversation. Yes, that is step 1. But step 2 on why live chat works is because of the turnaround time. If they can go from live chatting with you on your website to you as a practice calling them back within 5 minutes or less, you are going to have not just 80% of people showing up to their appointment, but 80% treatment acceptance. Because to Sasha's point in his seminar he just gave, it's the wow factor. It's the fact that they went from live chat to phone call to hearing from someone to making an appointment. You are already impressing them with your customer service. And if you could provide that customer service to a brand new patient who you don't even know, they can only imagine how your customer service will be and how the care and your treatment will be once they get into the practice. So I do encourage everyone to try out live chat. And we are more than happy to offer out a 60-day free trial of live chat to anyone who's in attendance of this seminar today. So if you'd like, I'll get to my information at the end here. And you can always send us an email, and we'd love to get you guys on a 60-day free trial. There's absolutely no obligation. See if you guys can convert more of your website traffic into new patient leads. And as I wrap this up, I want to finish off with the fact that we should be using all 6 of these things for optimized internet marketing performance. But why? Social media, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, Google ads, SEO, live chat, and your website are all going to perform different and all going to perform together. As confusing as that sounds, I want you guys to participate in all of it and measure them all in their individual silos. There's things that will work for you on Facebook, and there's things that won't. There's things that will work on Google ads, and there's things that won't. SEO will do great in some areas, and in other areas, the competition will be too much for you to actually go up in those rankings, at least in the short term. So I encourage you all to test everything, analyze, track your performance, and use your practice management software, something like a CareStack, to be able to track those patients and see what your real return on investment is. And for all of you who are concerned that it's too late, you know, my doctor, the doctor down the street has 500 reviews. I have 20. You know, they're already all on the first page. I'm not even on page 100. It's okay. This is not a typical game. This is the game of the internet, and it's always changing. The rules that we have on Facebook and Instagram and Google today, those rules change tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. And as long as we stay on top of the latest and the greatest, and we continue to play to those rules and know what those rules are at all times, we have the opportunity to jump ahead. So yes, you may be behind now, but jump into the game, play it right, get ahead, and you will be able to surpass any other practice that might be down the road that looks great now. A few weeks, a few months, a few years down the road, they may not look so great if you're participating in a better manner. So I want to thank you all for your attention today, and I want to thank everyone for joining us, for listening to Sasha's presentation, listening to mine. As I mentioned before, if you'd like to take us up on that 60-day free trial of live chat, we're more than happy to give that to you. You can email me at shay@yourdigitalresource.com, and we can get you right on it at any time. So thank you all for having us.
Shay, we have a question from somebody. How long does it take to get results? And how do I know if my marketing firm is any good?
So how long does it take to get results? And how do you know if your marketing firm is any good? So with search engine optimization, it's typically going to be about 3 to 6 months in an average area. If you're in an area like Miami, Los Angeles, New York City, Chicago, Atlanta, where you have a lot of dentists in a smaller area, it could take a little bit longer. And you also may want to go for zip codes. That could be helpful as well. Things like Facebook and Google, I typically say give it a month to ramp up. You may not see much, but in months 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you should see more and more and more and more to get to the point where you will start to plateau. So for example, Facebook and Google, month 1, let's call it 0, month 2, a little bit, 3 more, 5, 6, you'll have more and more. And then from month 6 on, you should pretty much be plateaued based on what your budget is when it comes to the paid advertising side of what you're doing.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions out there from the people that have joined us, from our participants? Shay, great job. I don't see any more questions. I have one last thing that I'd like to share with everyone who is kind enough to join us for our webinar, and thank you for listening to us.
I think Jim's got a question here.
Jim, you have a question?
Back on, please. Yeah, Sasha, turn your video back on, please.
We can't hear you very well.
Turn video on.
My apologies for that one. Thank you.
There you go.
I wanted to thank everyone for joining us. There's one last little bit that I'd like to share with you, but there's a Herculean effort that goes into putting together any of these events. And I just want to give some gratitude. And we also have some gifts for the attendees that are on the call. So first things first, I want to say thank you, because success is like an iceberg. You will see very little at the top, but there's a whole bunch of work that goes in the background. I want to thank the CareStack team for doing a tremendous job of pushing us out there. I also want to thank the Green Sky team, very specifically to Luis and Kip. They were very helpful. I also want to thank my TLCers. They allowed me the time that I needed to get this prepared. And for all those of you on the call, we will be sending out a copy of the recording. I can very easily be reached at sasha@tlcdental.com. You'll see my email address at the bottom. But one of the people I really want to thank is Digital Resources, very specific, Emily and Emily's department. She has literally bent over backwards putting all this together, and she's done a tremendous, tremendous job. So to her, I'm very, very grateful. Now, for all those of you on the call, CareStack, in conjunction with Green Sky, is basically offering 3 months free of CareStack to new clients. There is no long-term commitment. Simply send an email to smart@dentistsworkingsmarter to take advantage. The same thing goes for Digital Resource with their 60 days free of live chat. Simply send an email with your information to smart@dentistsworkingsmarter, and they will get you engaged and they will be in touch. And for everybody on this call, stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you for everything.
Thank you, everyone.